To some, he was the ultimate traitor, a man who turned his back on his own people, his own heritage. But to others, including Nelson Mandela, he was one of the bravest, most steadfast heroes of the freedom struggle. So which was he? The truth is, he was both, and he was something else entirely. This is the incredible story of Bram Fischer.
And this is the question that hangs over his entire life, isn't it? Why would someone born into the absolute heart of Afrikaner power, a man who could have had it all, maybe even become prime minister, choose to throw it all away and become the system's greatest enemy? It's a story that really makes you think about choice, about conscience, and what justice really costs.
Just try to picture this for a second. One day, you are at the absolute peak of your career. You're a celebrated Queen's Counsel, respected, admired, part of a legendary family. The next day, you give up your bail, you disappear into the shadows, and you become the most wanted fugitive in your own country. That's not a plot from a movie. That's exactly what Bram Fischer did. And to understand the why, you have to understand the world he came from.
So let's back up a little, because to really get a handle on his decision to go underground, we first have to understand just how astonishing that choice was. His entire life was a roadmap pointing in one direction, until he decided to take a completely different path.
I mean, just look at the contrast here. It's night and day. On one side, you have the life he was born into. We're talking Afrikaner royalty. His grandfather was a prime minister, his father, a judge-president. He was destined for the highest offices in the land. But then, look at the other side, the life he chose. A member of the illegal Communist Party, the top lawyer defending the ANC, and eventually, a hunted fugitive, an enemy of the very state he was supposed to lead. This wasn't just a change of heart. It was a complete and total rejection of his entire world.
So how does a transformation that profound even happen? Well, it wasn't an overnight switch. It started with this one, single, jarring moment of clarity he called his road to Damascus. He was at a gathering and instinctively felt this wave of revulsion at the thought of shaking an African man's hand. And in that same instant, he was flooded with memories of his two childhood best friends who were black. He realized right then and there, in his own words, that he had been brainwashed. That personal crisis became a political mission. He went looking for a political home that wasn't defined by race, and at the time, the only one was the Communist Party. From that point on, his path was set. He took his brilliant legal mind and dedicated it to the struggle, not just defending its leaders, but helping shape its vision by co-drafting a new constitution for the ANC. And his commitment was forged in the fire of these huge political trials, culminating in the massive treason trial, where his legal strategy got all 156 leaders acquitted.
And that brings us to his most famous, most high-stakes battle. The one that would not only push his legal skills to the absolute limit, but would also put him in incredible personal danger. This was the Rivonia Trial, the case that would determine the fate of the entire anti-apartheid leadership.
The stakes here were absolute. After a police raid on a farm in Rivonia, the entire high command of the ANC's armed wing was in the dock. We're talking Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Govan Mbeki, all of them. The charge was sabotage, and the state prosecutor was openly calling for the death penalty. If they lost this case, the liberation movement could be decapitated in a single blow.
So how did Fischer and his team save them? Well, it was a masterclass in legal strategy. First, he went after the state's case on a technicality, pointing out how sloppy and contradictory their indictment was, and he actually got it thrown out. It bought them precious time. But his real masterstroke was how he dealt with the prosecution's smoking gun, a document called Operation Mayabuya, which was a detailed plan for guerrilla warfare. Instead of denying it existed, Fischer painstakingly proved that while this plan had been discussed, it had never been formally adopted by the ANC. It was a brilliant move. It gave the judge just enough legal wiggle room to avoid the death penalty. Bram Fischer, quite literally, saved their lives.
And Nelson Mandela himself captured the uniqueness of Fischer's sacrifice perfectly. He later said that no matter what he and the others went through, they were fighting with their people, for their people. But Bram, he said, was different. Bram was a free man, a privileged man, who made the conscious choice to fight against his own people, to turn his back on his own tribe, all for a higher principle of justice for everyone. That, Mandela said, was a level of courage in a class all by itself.
But saving the Rivonia leaders? Well, that came at a huge personal cost. The state was furious that it had been denied its executions, so it turned its full vindictive power onto their lawyer. Suddenly, Bram Fischer was accused number one in his own trial, and that forced him to make the most dramatic choice of his life.
So now he's the one on trial for being a member of the illegal Communist Party, but he'd seen what was happening. He'd seen former comrades being pressured and tortured into becoming state witnesses. He knew a fair trial was impossible, and he believed the struggle had to continue from inside the country, not from exile. So, in January 1965, he wrote a powerful letter to the court, forfeited his massive bail, and just vanished.
For 294 days, almost 10 months, he was a ghost. The press gave him a nickname, the Rui Pimpernel, the Red Pimpernel. He was living in the suburbs of Johannesburg, right under the noses of the security police, disguised with a goatee and dyed hair, using the name Douglas Black. But he wasn't just hiding, he was working. He was moving between safe houses, secretly writing pamphlets, trying desperately to rebuild the shattered underground networks of the struggle, all while being the target of the biggest manhunt in South African history.
And when he was finally captured, he stood in the very same dock that Mandela had occupied, and he explained his actions in one of the most powerful speeches in the country's history. He said that his deep, lifelong respect for the law was exactly what forced him to break it. He argued, when the laws themselves become immoral, a higher duty arises. This compels one to refuse to recognize such laws. For him, it was simple. Justice was a higher authority than the law of apartheid.
So how did it all end? Tragically. It wasn't through brilliant detective work, it was through state-sanctioned cruelty. The police arrested a close comrade of his, Violet Weinberg. They subjected her to 70 straight hours of sleep deprivation interrogation. 70 hours. They called it a legal technique. Fischer rightly called it torture. And eventually, inevitably, she broke and revealed his hiding place. The great manhunt was over.
His capture really marked the beginning of the final, tragic chapter of his life. But his sacrifice was about to create a legacy that would long outlive the evil regime that put him in prison.
Fischer was sentenced to life in prison, and because he was seen as an Afrikaner traitor, the prison authorities singled him out for especially cruel and harsh treatment. He eventually developed terminal cancer in prison. He was only released to his brother's home a few weeks before he died. And in one final, unbelievably vindictive act, the state confiscated his ashes, making sure his grave could never become a shrine or a rallying point. To this day, they have never been found.
And this, right here, is the ultimate tragedy of his story. Of all the heroes of the Rivonia Trial, the lawyers, the accused, all of them, Bram Fischer is the only one who didn't survive to see the dawn of the free and democratic South Africa he gave everything to build. He fought and died for a future he would never get to see.
But today, his sacrifice is anything but forgotten. The new South Africa has reclaimed his memory and honored him. The airport in his hometown is now the Bram Fischer International Airport. Major roads and buildings bear his name. In 2003, the very same legal body that disbarred him posthumously reinstated him, righting a terrible historic wrong. He inspired generations of leaders from Mandela to Steve Biko, and the nation awarded him its highest civilian honor. His name is now woven into the very fabric of the country he helped set free.
And so, the incredible life of Bram Fischer leaves us with this one profound question. It forces all of us to ask ourselves, where does our true loyalty lie? Is it to our group, our country, or is it to something bigger, to justice itself? For Bram Fischer, the answer was crystal clear, and he paid the ultimate price for believing in it.